Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. My name is Yogesh Chavda. I'm the founder of Y2S Consulting and the host of Next Frontier Insights. This afternoon, I am so delighted to have Anna Juneja here with me on the podcast. I've been following Anna for a few months now on TikTok um, because she's been posting incredible content around AI and the legal space. Anna's a lawyer, and she's about to introduce herself in a second, but just so you know, um, this is an area that is obviously fast changing. A lot of us have questions, I'm sure, but more importantly, this is an opportunity for all of us to learn together from Anna's knowledge and experience in this space. So, Anna, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the introduction.
So, Anna, I asked this to everybody when I started the program is that tell us who you are and how did you get to where you are today?
Sure. So, my name is Anna Janeja, and I am an intellectual property attorney. So, I deal with patents, trademarks, copyrights, and that is the sector of law that is most closely related to AI right now. So, I was, an IP attorney. I've been an IP attorney now, around a decade, and so it's a very tech-heavy field.
Mhm.
And just as AI has emerged and has grown over the last several years, a few years before it was mainstream, I've been working on AI legal issues, since then, since it
Yeah.
emerged. And so the thing about my field of law and how I kind of got here and why I do what I do with the content I make about AI, the legal space, and how AI relates to people's legal rights and things like that is in my field of law, we see everything a couple years ahead of time. So we get to see what is being filed, what's going on a couple years before the general public gets to see it. And so that gives me a lot of insight into kind of what's going on from a legal standpoint, but also from an economic standpoint, from a social standpoint, and things like that in just a really unique way. And I'm very into, economics, business, all of that, because that so closely relates to my clients' needs and helping me be a pragmatic attorney. And just the way AI has fallen into all of our lives, we are that's kind of how I came to be doing exactly what I'm doing now.
Amazing, amazing, and the fact that you're seeing things earlier than everybody else, that just is an amazing insight in its own right. Because I don't think people realize that, quite frankly speaking, that the attorneys are the ones who are actually having to deal with it, putting all the guardrails in place for those organizations ahead of time before things actually come to the marketplace, right? So,
Yeah,
uh,
so it's not
yeah,
really guardrails, because I think guardrails tend to come later. What
okay,
we deal with in my field is innovation. So people who are innovating, we're advising them on their risks and how to monetize and leverage their innovation. That's kind of, it's a very niche, whatever that word is, field of law. So it's
right.
unique to the tech space in that way.
Amazing. So I'm sure you'll be correcting me with my own words here because I'm not a lawyer. So
Of
forgive me if
course.
I'm doing that. But I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot in the process as well. I'm very open to that, of course. So tell me, you talked about innovation. You talked about entrepreneurs. You kind of like talked about the space that's emerging right now. What are the key trends that are you seeing right now in the space of AI and intellectual property?
So I would say the biggest shock that I think all IP attorneys and business attorneys are seeing right now is the high revenue potential with AI for small and even solo businesses. So never before have I seen so many, multi-millionaire solopreneurs. And I know there's so much media news and hype about everybody who's VC funded and billion-dollar rounds, this and that, but at the end of the day, if you're a $100 billion company with $0 in your bank account, it's quite less impressive than a single person who's making 2-3 million a month, with 2 hours a day with their Chat GPT account.
Yeah.
To me, it's that it's just on a common sense level. It's very impressive what people are doing with AI right now. So that's kind of the biggest emerging trend. Is there's so much innovation on a micro scale that we really haven't seen before. I think there was a surge of this over COVID,
Yeah.
but this is like on another level.
Amazing. So I've heard the hype. I didn't know it was actually real. So you're confirming and saying that it's actually happening right now with all these solopreneurs who are making millions of dollars through their own unique solutions with AI.
Yeah, I think there's just so many people who have a lot of expertise in their field or have a lot of experience, and they were never able to do anything much with it beyond what a traditional path would allow for,
Yeah.
because it took so much. People didn't have hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars to develop an app and get a business going. But now that you can do it on your own, you can distribute on your own with marketing, your wheelhouse. It's so easy. You're on the same playing field as anybody else today.
Amazing, amazing. No, that's true. I'm building my own tools right now, and I'm seeing the kind of traction I get. And I'm also surprised at how, if you get the right tools built out, it's easy to get companies wanting to come and talk to you, compared to the past where you'd be knocking on doors and nobody's even listening to you, basically, right? So the world has shifted from that perspective. So tell me, as you're thinking about the space, um, what are the what are the things you should solopreneurs or entrepreneurs be thinking about in the context of intellectual property? Like, if there's like a two or three things that you would suggest that people should be thinking about, what would that be?
Yeah, first of all, I would say they should be thinking about it at all because they usually don't. Um, Unfortunately, the smaller the business or first time business owners, they sometimes don't even know they have IP. But our world is only getting more digital, as we know. And
Yeah.
as the world gets more digital, more online, more intangible,
Yeah.
your intellectual property is actually exponentially more important and valuable. If not valuable, it is necessary to secure, because if you don't and you have a great idea, you build something out, any big player can just come and take it. So the biggest things right now that I see lacking, I won't say the obvious stuff like, trademark your name, make sure no you're not using someone else's name, don't infringe on other, don't steal photos from Google. Like everybody, can Google those type of rules. But in the AI world, I would say the biggest thing people really need to focus on is make sure that you have, if you have proprietary workflows, methods, processes, any sort of trade secret, make sure that what you're doing, you actually protect early on, like immediately. It's a time limited thing. There's lots of strategy that goes into it. You have to budget for IP protection. Otherwise, you're just a wrapper that,
Mhm.
OpenAI could ship something tomorrow and take your whole business. So I'm also seeing a ton of that. We're all seeing a ton of that. We're seeing a ton of chatter about, oh, it's just a wrapper.
Mhm.
And yeah, a lot of things are just wrappers and they don't have protection, and then your business is worth zero.
Hmm.
So you can go from millions of dollars to zero overnight. You don't want to be in that position. You want to actually be protecting what you're doing. And if you're doing it and especially if you have expertise or experience that you're leveraging in the AI world, like for example, if a marketing professional has spent years developing like a process workflow that they know works, and now they're applying it to AI and they're putting all their expertise into it, it's, like it could be possible that you're the very first of your kind doing that particular thing with AI, and it's very valuable to others in your field. And if that's the case, you want to make sure that you actually own that, so that when other people do it, or big tech companies or other tech companies try to do it and scale it, that you can, be paid for that.
But do you think that people can actually stop others from copying what you've done? Because I've heard it from both angles. What you're saying makes complete sense to me, right? And I've heard of people doing that, and getting IP protection put in. But then I also hear the other side of it saying, yeah, you can do it, but people still ignore it and they still do it anyways. So
Right, but of course, yes, it's not, you can't put a gun to anybody's head and stop them from doing something, just like people can go out and rob a bank as well. It's
yeah,
theft though, so you have recourse. And if you
yeah,
don't protect your IP, you don't have recourse.
right, right. That
So
and
it's,
that's
it's
the
a
distinction.
strategic decision on who you're going after, right? Are you going to go after your neighbor who has $2 to their name? No. But are you
Yeah,
going to go after OpenAI? Yes. So there's
yeah,
lots of common sense that goes into that. But if you don't even own what you're building, it's kind of like you're squatting on a house. You think it's yours, but somebody else owns the deed. Or they
right.
could go register and own the deed without you knowing.
Understand. So, can you just break it down a little bit for me? Because when let's say, for example, I got 30 years of experience working in marketing, right? I apply my knowledge to create a workflow process or a solution. that I know is relevant in the marketing world. What is exactly the part that's protected? Is it the workflow process? Is it the framework? How where
So
what are you doing? You know,
that's a very like fact specific question. So it's
yeah,
going to depend on what you're actually doing. I'll give you an example that I can tell you that's very specific and
yeah,
that I can tell you in detail since I've patents already filed on it. But
yeah,
during my legal writing, a lot of what lawyers do in a lot of legal thinking is looking at
yeah,
things from the other party's point of view. What is the judge going to think? What is your opposer, going to think? Things like that. So through my experimentation,
yeah,
using AI for 8 hours a day, using AI for 8 hours a day for several years,
yeah,
I learned that when you use AI in one thread, you actually can't switch viewpoints. It doesn't work. You need strict isolation. You need to open up new threads. You need new API calls, and you need to prime each call. So that particular method and workflow is something I discovered months, maybe years before. I mean, at this point, it's going to be years before anybody else has discovered, including big legal tech companies. So I
yeah.
have patents on that particular thing, using strict isolation for separate workflows, for separate viewpoints. So that is something that is a method, so to speak, a process that I have patented. So as people develop their AI workflows and AI methods, there may be things that are new, novel, proprietary to them, and those are the things you can protect. Exactly what it is going to depend on what you've
Yeah.
actually created, whether it's a process, a framework, things like that. Some things can't be protected with intellectual property registrations like patent filings, but some
Yeah.
things can.
And what about things, and again, I'm coming from a naive perspective, so forgive me if the questions sound naive, but um, what about like prompts? I've heard people say that, you can actually create like proprietary prompts for whatever situation, and that can also be protected as well. Is that true?
That's true to a certain extent. If you have some sort of library, if you have a specific framework or process type of thing for your prompts, but it's more technical. It's kind of like you can protect it with copyright if it's long enough, just like
Yeah.
people copyright their books and poems and things like that. But someone could change, one word and you might not have that protection anymore.
Yeah.
So, we're also moving to an age where the AI models are getting so good that
Yeah.
prompting it's still an extremely necessary skill. I don't want to say that because you and me at least are in an AI bubble, but
Yeah.
we're leaning into a world that in the next several months I predict prompting will not be as um, relevant of a skill. Like, it's putting us really far ahead right now to be a good prompter, but I don't think that edge just for being a good prompter is going to last.
I agree with that. I agree with that. And in fact, if anything, the systems are designed in a way, I think, that even if you put uh, vague terms or unclear terms, it can still figure out exactly what you're trying to get to, especially if you have a history of interacting with that particular LLM, for example. I see that with Claude all the time, actually, right now. So I don't know if that's your experience as well or not, but
Yeah, I think they're just getting very, very smart. And,
yeah.
even people who are not good at prompting are still now able to get very good output.
So are the existing, copyright and trademark laws prepared for AI? I'm just curious.
No, absolutely not. Just like there's a lot of news right now that Taylor Swift and Matthew McConaughey have filed these, AI trademarks.
Yeah.
It's all pretty much just BS. It's just hype. You know, there's no way a trademark can protect you from AI. Trademarks are to protect, branded goods and services. Like
Yeah.
if somebody's trying to sell you a fake Chanel bag, that's kind of what trademark law protects. It doesn't protect you from deep fakes. That falls under something called the right of publicity, which is state specific. It's in some ways weaker than a federal trademark law. So people are trying to skirt around the issue because the laws aren't there. But no, the laws are completely inadequate. Not only are the laws completely inadequate, the people writing the laws are also extremely incompetent. Just as an example, the Copyright Office last year issued some 3 guidance memos about artificial intelligence and deepfakes and prompting, and whether or not um, people who are using AI to create, any sort of literature or other art form, if they're protected by copyright law and things. And I mean, they're saying any use of AI that's not with enough human intervention is not copyrightable, right? They don't define how much is enough human interaction. They don't define if your final output is not edited by a human, because you could write a 500-page book and put it through AI to edit it. And maybe if you don't touch that final edit, who knows if they're going to say that's, allowed to be copyrighted. So they don't understand what iterating is. They've probably never used ChatGPT even before, let alone any of the other tools that, we're all using. So the laws and the lawmakers are incredibly inadequate right now.
So what are people to do then? Because if there's going to be this hodgepodge or lack of any framework, then it's literally the wild, wild west in a sense, isn't it?
Absolutely. So right now, the biggest thing that people, the biggest thing you can do right now is to make sure that every vendor you work with understands AI and actually understands compliance. So just as an example, if you have business needs or tax needs or something, if you're hiring an M&A attorney, like a merger and acquisition attorney, because you're selling your business, and they don't understand AI, they're now drafting documents to transfer assets that they actually can't even comprehend how they work, which means they're going to miss things and things will be messed up, right? So, that's just one tiny example of something that could go wrong. If you're working with a marketing team that doesn't understand AI and that marketing team creates deepfakes of a celebrity for your product, you're now on the hook for something that they shouldn't have been doing because they didn't understand, how AI works and the laws and things. So I think, being extra vigilant right now is really necessary. And I think just making sure that, it's hard though. It's hard because the AI companies, because these tools are so cheap and accessible, whenever anything is cheap, free, or super accessible in the way that AI is right now, you are the product. And it's hard, it's really hard. It's hard to advise on it in a general sense. For companies that are really serious about innovation and stuff, they're working with good legal teams and good vendors across the board that understand AI.
So I can relate to that because I'm working with a couple of companies right now where the legal process of just getting approved as a vendor has proven to be incredibly challenging because they have so many questions that they're asking. And I'm trying to go through the process of answering all the questions as best as I possibly can, of course. But in that process, if, you mentioned that, the legal structure and the lawmakers, they're lagging behind. It's on the companies and the individual to do what they think is appropriate. What are you seeing in that context? Because what I'm seeing right now is there's some companies that are like, no problem, let's do it. Excuse me. And then there are others where they're like, we're going to be very locked down.
I think it's definitely a detriment to the companies that are not using AI or who are choosing to kind of deter their AI use or push it off till later. I think that's going to harm them in the short and long term. I do understand the risk why they're doing that. So, right now is a huge advantage for small and medium enterprises because they can move a lot faster than corporations can when it comes to AI, because they don't have, they're answering to a board of directors. They don't have the flexibility to move as fast. So, when it comes to using AI, there are risks. There's risks if you go on ChatGPT right now and ask it about your parking ticket, because that's not you're not using a confidential AI for that, right? So there's risks at every turn point to using AI. But, most lawyers will tell you, okay, so don't use it, right? But I'm telling you, think about this from a common sense perspective. And I'm like personally building legal tech tools to help consumers with this issue. But if you have a question about a situation with AI, you're getting a new contract from a vendor, or you wonder if you're allowed to do something with AI, if it's legal or not, and you ask that question to ChatGPT and that's not confidential, what is the risk that something is going to happen if you do that thing, right? Probably 1%. Some people are going to take that risk and some people are not. Then if you take that 1% risk and the worst case scenario happens, what's the case you actually get a lawsuit filed against you? If that lawsuit gets filed against you, what's the chance that you are going to receive any sort of, default judgment, bad judgment against you. The risks get exponentially smaller as you go down the worst case scenario path. Now, it just depends on your own risk tolerance level. You want to mitigate the big risks. So, don't make a deep fake of Taylor Swift selling your product when you don't have permission for it. You're probably going to get sued. But using AI to do, create some copy and post it, lower risk. So, you can make those type of pragmatic decisions, but it is not a risk-free tool right now. And there's very little extremely black and white guidance any lawyer can give you.
Yeah, no, I understand that. So one area that I've been personally worried about, I do a lot of posts on LinkedIn. I have a newsletter that I have that goes out usually every Monday morning. And, I spend time thinking about a topic. I use ChatGPT and Claude to help me think it through, from different angles. And I then basically craft it. I'm not a writer. I have ChatGPT write it for me. But I always worry about the fact that, is there something that I'm bringing in that may have been written by somebody else that has now influenced me in the way I'm writing it? So I try to keep my original thinking in each post that I do. But just because I've used a ChatGPT or a Claude to help me with the process, it's influenced me as well in terms of what's going on. So, are there some lines I should be thinking about or drawing? I'm not looking for personal guidance here, but I'm just asking it as a general sense as to how should people think about this.
So there's always a risk that it's going to regurgitate something that's been written before, right? And even if it's not regurgitating exact information, it is. A lot of people have a belief that all AI use is copyright infringement because it's been trained on, written work from other humans. That there's lots of lawsuits about that out there right now. None of them have been, most of them have been dismissed because the lawyers bringing these lawsuits find these plaintiffs to file these cases and they don't understand anything about AI or the technology. So they're very poorly written. They should have, put those lawsuits into ChatGPT and asked it some questions, but they don't do that. So the vast majority of these author brought lawsuits are thrown out or they're dismissed very easily so far. That's what we've seen. There's a couple like the New York Times and things like that that are being still in the works. So as more case law comes out on whether or not judges are viewing what AI models are currently doing as copyright infringement, that will determine the downstream liability for people using it. I predict, though, that the legal industry, the judicial branch, judges are not going to try to disseminate the whole AI industry, that they're not going to come down and rule that AI companies are infringing by using human written work for creating their LLMs and trading their LLMs. So I think that there's not too much liability in people just generally using an LLM. Now, if you go out there and you're uploading a bunch of specific writings from someone and saying, write like this person, that's another legal question. So there's very limited legal protection in the age of AI. I'll say that. So if you go and you say, okay, write me a story in the voice of J.K. Rowling and make it about XYZ, this wizard does that, this happens, that story may be something that she could have written and she could have made money from. It's in her voice, but she can't really take any action against you under current law. So I don't know if that kind of, explains how vague and bad and gray area the laws are now.
That is scary, actually, isn't it? In terms of because from a creator's perspective, you want to obviously retain your rights in terms of your voice, your tone, the content that you're putting out, and you want it to be yours, not somebody else doing it on your behalf and making money off of you.
I can take all my TikTok scripts for videos I've done. I have dozens, maybe hundreds of them now for the last many years that I've been making videos, and I can just upload it into Claude or ChatGPT and say, hey, tell me what's the recent AI and tech news or any legal news, these are my videos I've made before. Tell me any new topics I should do it on, and then write me a script in my voice, and it does it. And that's how I write all my video scripts now, and it's pretty spot on. So and as in the quality is better or as good as mine would have been. And
Right.
I do it in like, it takes me 30 seconds. So, and I'm copyright infringing myself, right? So it doesn't matter. And it's also new work, but you can do that now. So it's just like a crazy world. Someone else could do that. They could take all my video scripts and do that to me.
True. So that gets me to another question around digital twins. I'm sure you're familiar with that, of course, right? So as companies or people start creating digital twins of themselves, or brands create it, for different communities, that's a huge conversation happening right now in the marketing world and the market research world, of creating digital twins of different consumer segments, replicating behavioral patterns and attitudinal patterns and everything else like that. How would that work from a legal perspective then? Because somebody could come around and say, wait a minute, that's reflecting who I am. I didn't give you permission.
So that goes back to the deep fakes. That goes back to there's not a lot of protection for that. Somebody can take your likeness and copy it. And unless you are somewhat of a famous person, you really have very limited protection. So a lot of courts have defined a famous person as having at least 30,000 followers. Now that number was way before influencers existed, because now everybody, could have 30,000 followers. But if you don't have any sort of public presence, you're less likely, right, to get your image stolen from. But even then, there's cameras everywhere, biometric stations everywhere, things like that. So people your identity is clearly up in the cloud somewhere. None of us are that protected. But if you are a person that's, trying to prevent people from creating a deep fake of yourself, it's hard. There's not a lot of recourse that you have. And if the recourse you have requires going through expensive legal battles, so it's rough out there. There are things you can do. There's creative things you could do. You could if you have a distinctive enough persona, you could copyright your character. You could also copyright things like your profile picture. Like a lot of celebrities right now are trying to trademark their name. That's the wrong avenue. They're attorneys are probably just selling them on doing some stuff that's not really going to help them. It's more of a kind of doing it for the publicity of it, to say that they're protecting themselves from AI. There is no true protection from AI right now. The laws have not caught up. There's proposals, but nothing in the US.
So given that, you mentioned earlier about the New York Times, they're going through this court case with OpenAI, and obviously people are following that particular storyline. Are there other storylines that may or may not be in the press that we should be also following?
So I would say deepfake cases are really important. The OpenAI case is important. The OpenAI New York Times case is going to be important because other companies like Anthropic, they settled, so we don't have a ruling on that. Why the OpenAI New York Times case is really important is because it might be one of the first rulings of what a judge says about this that we have. And, judges are, as bad of decisions that a lot of judges make, they're not stupid. They understand the economics of the AI industry and things. So they understand how much their decisions carry weight and how it'll affect the rest of, these cases. Other one is, and I don't know the exact name of this case, but it is the suicide OpenAI case. That's going to be an important one from a liability perspective. When AI does something when you do something with AI as a business owner and something goes wrong, who gets in trouble for it? Is it you or is it AI? That's going to, be an important case to follow. The California suicide case, also the Canada school shooter case is going to be an important one. So those are the big ones I would say are really important for everybody using AI to be staying aware of.
Can you remind people as to what was the Canada one?
The Canada one was, there was a school shooter who used ChatGPT to plan the school shooting. I haven't read the threads. I don't know if they've been released yet, but it had something to do with, there was a school shooter. He was speaking to ChatGPT to a point where OpenAI employees were concerned. And then, days later, hours later, maybe he went and there was a big school shooting. So, there's questions of whether AI enabled him to do so and encouraged him to do so, et cetera. Same thing with the suicide one. It was where a boy developed a relationship with, his chat bot, and then, committed suicide after, and it's whether or not that AI conditioned him to commit that act. Did it help him commit that act? So those cases are like, how much responsibility are courts going to be giving to AI? Those are the cases to watch. And that's important for all business owners, because if courts are going to say, okay, AI has to take on all the liability, that, is going to maybe change your decision on how much disclaimers and things you're going to give your clients and customers when you're using AI to service them.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, yeah, I can see that how it cascades across everybody then in that sense.
Yeah, these will be the cases that affect everybody.
Yeah. Are you seeing anything in the financial side, perhaps, that could also just be as impactful?
Just that there's a lot of people creating with AI, and a lot of them are creating worthless wrappers. So you gotta be really careful with making sure that what you're creating is valuable.
Mm-hmm.
So, but from a financial point, no, AI is changing everything, because it's not just changing the way people are working, it's just eliminating the need for them as a whole. Mm-hmm. So it's different than any technology we've had before.
Do you think that, with all the conversations that are happening right now around, AI taking away jobs, and people are obviously stressing and worrying about that, has there been any conversations on in your space around employees filing any kind of class action lawsuit or anything like that against
employees? The employees have no opportunity for that. If you are doing a job and your job is no longer needed, mm-hmm. There's no recourse for you. If you're in today's day and age, if your job is to be, if your job is to make butter by hand, you're probably just not going to have a job. You can't sue somebody for that. So in my field, I'm of the belief that AI is better than 99% of lawyers out there. And it's true. It's actually true. And that's just the reality of the world. They're not, the legal industry is heavily regulated, and they have some protection in that sense. But AI can do most of what people are doing now. Whether or not the technology is there to put every single piece together to replace a human, that will come over the next 5 to 10 years for most jobs, white collar jobs. I think we're far behind on the robotic side. The AI for white collar jobs is moving much faster, like an exponentially faster space than robotics are moving. The human body is so intricate, and human movements are so intricate that there's so many things that right now only humans can do, and probably will be there, for a long time. There's a lot more hardware and expense that goes into creating robotics. So blue collar workers, things like that, less at risk. But for white collar jobs, everybody's on thin ice, including you and me. So that's just the reality of it. People should be, they're going to have to prepare in whatever way they can for that.
It's funny you brought up robotics, because I went to the Consumer Electronics Show this January in Las Vegas. And if there was one theme that was very clear to me, is that the robots are coming. The quality of the robots, the movements, the activities that can already be done today is kind of mind-blowing, actually. So,
really, so I was at CES too, and I thought the robots were very behind.
You think so, really?
Yeah.
Why did you feel that?
So I think robotics in the fields that are going to be the money makers are going to be blue collar work and healthcare. So I think in those two areas, it's still so, yes, there's robots that can do dances and shake hands and stuff, but to perform some sort of surgery, you need a lot of, humans get trained for years to do that specific surgery, and to be able to react to real-time things in the human body. The way that AI and technology learns is exponentially slower than how humans learn. So just as an example, if you tell your kid that this is a dog and you point to a dog, that kid is going to remember what a dog is its entire life. It's never going to need to be reminded of what a dog is. It's always going to be able to feel its presence. if you drop a glass of wine, you know always and forever that when you drop a glass of wine, it's going to shatter and everything's going to spill everywhere. You're not going to have amnesia the next time you're holding a glass of wine. You're not going to drop it, as a human. With AI has to be told that a dog is a dog with a picture of a dog, 5,000 times to be able to identify a dog. Right. AI doesn't know that when you drop a glass of wine, it spills. It only knows that in its algorithm, it sees the words dropping glass, wine spilling, breaking. It only knows that those words appear together a lot in, humanity. So AI learns really slow. Technology learns really slow. It takes a lot more resources to teach technology. So when it comes to these very high money-making things that robotics is going to be useful for, I think it's so complex that we're far off from that. And then when you look at blue collar work, labor is so much cheaper than like building out the technology to replace even that. Like the day-to-day, I think we're still far off. That's my feelings on robotics. That could change like overnight. But yeah. I felt the robots were, like I've been following robotics a little bit, and I think the growth is a lot slower than like what we thought we would. I was just looking at this thing on TikTok about this robot that paints your nails, and it's like painting your nails is a pretty simple process, like 5-year-olds paint their nails. Like it's not that hard, and the robot's not that good at it. So that's kind of where my mindset is on it.
So see, it's a very interesting take. I get where you're coming from. So here's my take on what I saw, right? You're right. We saw a lot of dancing robots and, doing all these moves and stuff like that. I get that part of it. And I agree with you, that they have to still be programmed to take certain kinds of actions. But the thing that kind of like, got me thinking was that there, think about the military, right? You could see a military grade robot suddenly entering the battlefield. Like we're seeing with drones right now in Ukraine and all these places right now already. We're seeing how that's working. But I think the next level of stuff that's going to happen, I think, is robots. In the military and on the battlefield. You don't have to have very smart robots. It just needs to know to duck and to shoot. It's a pretty simple, process, true. Right? And it has to know where to target and who to target, basically, and that's pretty much it. So, that's one area I could see it occurring, relatively quickly. And there are governments who can afford to spend money on that kind of stuff. It's not obviously going to be done by corporations, of course, but the other big area I thought was actually around space exploration, right? You can now suddenly send robots to Mars way before even humans show up, and you could actually do a different kind of exploration now because of that. We saw that with the rover machine or whatever it was called, for a few years, but now you could have robots doing it too. I can see that happening. So I think the use cases are going to be very different than the ones that we're currently looking at, is what I suspect. But I don't know. It all depends on what.
Do you think those sectors are money making though?
It's for the companies. It is who are going to be making for the
military. The companies. It is, yeah. But for the economy as a whole, I think once there's healthcare robots, everything will change.
Yeah, no, I get that.
Healthcare is such a big part of the economy.
I don't know if you saw this particular booth. There's a company called Lovens. I don't know if you saw that when you were there.
I can't remember.
It's a Chinese company. They make adult sex toys and all that kind of stuff. But they actually had a robot that was providing intimacy to people, and it would look very lifelike. And the conversations it was having was pretty incredible, right? Now, this is the first use case. Is it going to be 100% right? Probably not. There's going to be iterations of that, of course. But
that's going to be a big industry too.
Yeah. So it's I think it's going to be those edge cases where you're going to see robots showing up in ways that you wouldn't have thought, I think, and then it'll eventually become mainstream in other places over time as the technology improves. But I think it's those stigmatized areas is where you're going to see the actual innovation happening, quite frankly speaking.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting because I've heard so much about it being like people are really having parasocial relationships with their chatbots and things like that. So it's going to be interesting to see how that develops, especially, with Gen Z and younger generations that don't have, quite frankly, adequate social skills to, I think, live in now the world and recognize what's a normal and non-normal relationship. So we'll have to see.
Well, that's that's going to be an interesting one for sure. It could help tackle the loneliness epidemic that's going on. I'm even thinking about on the other end of the spectrum where you think about elderly patients who are dealing with dementia or Alzheimer's. You could have robots who could be offering them support.
Yeah.
That's a whole new use case as well.
Definitely. So I was I talked about this on another podcast I was on because they were saying that there was going to be a lot of, and it was of course the host of that podcast were men, so I don't think they quite got it. They were saying that childcare robots were going to be a big thing. I don't think so. I would never leave my child with a robot. I just think that's more far off than elder care robots. I think elder care robots will be a big economic thing too. I think we're far off from the child care robots and in-home robots too.
Yeah, that's going to take a while because it's going to take a lot to trust anything with your own child at the end of the day, right? So even with humans, we go through a vetting process at the end of the day before you actually bring something
before you even have another human in your house. Yeah,
exactly. So there's going to be all that stuff that's going to have to happen, but I don't think some of these use cases that I'm referring to are that far away. I'm thinking it's going to happen in the next 5 years, quite frankly speaking.
And once something comes, it comes so fast and improves so fast that everything could change even tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I just think robots, digital twins, deep fakes, all these areas are like somewhat on the edge right now, but they're starting to become a little bit more mainstream. And I don't know if you like watching that show Law and Order or not. I'm a big fan of the show. And in January of this year, they had a show about the storyline around this woman who got influenced by her dead husband, but they created a digital twin of her dead husband who influenced her to go and murder the person who thought had killed her husband, basically. And she ended up committing the murder. So the whole storyline was around that and the law and how should she be found guilty or not and all that kind of stuff. I was totally blown away by that particular episode because it was totally playing in the space of digital twins. And I'm like, I never thought about that. Like the law is actually not clear about any of this stuff.
No, it's not. It's not.
Yeah. In fact, that show is what triggered me to reach out to you because when I saw that show, I was like, you know what? This is why I need to talk to Anna.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting. I think we're years away from having clarity in the legal space. My prediction on all of this is for the next several years, we'll see a lot of just cases be dismissed or settled and things like that. And judges not wanting to really make any decisions. And if judges aren't making decisions, we're not going to have decisions because Congress can't wrap their head around it and do their job and make any laws about this stuff. Yeah. So we're years off from having any true clarity, let alone pretty much all of the lawyers people are hiring, like 99% of them don't understand what's going on either. So they're unfortunately for, people, if you're in the business world, even in the real world, but in the business world especially, you're not escaping the law. The law is there whether, you want it or not. Just like you have to pay taxes every year. You have to also follow laws all the time, 24/7. So when you're doing things in an unregulated space, you can get in trouble at any moment, or you can get ripped off at any moment and people can get away with it. Right. So, when you're living and building a business around an unregulated space, it puts you at risk and you're unlikely to have a lot of clarity anytime soon.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. So let's take that thought and now bring it down back to the tangible, right? So I'm a small business owner or a small brand. What should I be doing in this crazy world of the wild, wild west when it comes to AI and, lack of regulations? You mentioned a few things already in the last, 45 minutes or so. But if you were to give people a roadmap of saying, these are must-dos, these are nice-to-haves, and these are optionals, what would, if you were to create a list like that, what would that list look like?
Yeah, I would say must-dos are make sure you're using confidential AI, which most people are not. Make sure that you are auditing what you have frequently and early, which means you have to go to an actual lawyer that understands AI.
Yeah.
And make sure that, you are keeping aware of kind of the big cases. Those are 3 must-dos. I wouldn't say like, anything else your lawyer will have to customize to your situation, because it's going to depend on, are you a digital marketing business, or are you an accountant, or are you selling, physical product, or are you selling an app that does something, right? So your risk will depend on what service or product that you're providing. But I would say those are the big ones. Keep up to date on those big cases, like the suicide case, the school shooting case, and the New York Times case. Those are 3 big ones that are going to affect every single person, in the world pretty much, and every business owner, and how they operate their business. Use confidential AI and make sure that your lawyer, your accountant, every vendor that you're working with understands AI, but especially your lawyer.
And just to be clear, when you say confidential AI, what do you mean exactly by that?
So when you use AI, like a consumer account or a paid account or that $200 account, that's not confidential. You're sharing everything you're doing with a third party. So technically, this hasn't been tested in court, but technically when you do that, you're sharing all your ideas with a third party. So they're not private anymore. So you need to have an enterprise or business account, or you need to use some sort of, vendor that's providing you with confidential AI.
So when ChatGPT says they have a business account, is that still third party, or is that a business account like the way you're describing?
So if your business account has the privacy protection, then it's true. You'll have to look. So every vendor you use, whether it's ChatGPT, Anthropic, you need to look at the terms of service of what it says about confidentiality.
Okay, because
before you sign up.
Okay, so they say that you have the option to toggle off the switch, where your
having the option to toggle off doesn't matter. It's what matters. Courts have already ruled on this. What matters is the terms of service, and that controls.
Oh, okay.
That's basically the contract you're signing with the company.
Okay, that's not clear to a lot of people.
I know. So I'm building a legal tech product to provide people with a confidential legal AI. So because it's a huge problem. There was a case recently where this executive had in-depth conversations with Claude about his case, and then the other party said, turn it over. And the judge said, yeah, turn it over. It's not confidential. So imagine you've committed a bunch of financial crimes, and you've had long, in-depth conversations about, was this illegal? Am I allowed to do this? What should I, what's the law? I don't understand, blah, blah, blah. And now all that conversation that you've had is now getting turned over to the other side.
Wow.
Right? So that's what happens when you use regular stuff for your legal needs.
So when you say confidential AI, where and how do you even find it? Like I actually don't know how to do that. So
you need an enterprise or business account, and in that account, you have to make sure that you contact them. There's several steps you have to take. You have to contact them, make sure they're not using it for either training or research purposes. So you have to actually contact the company and get confirmation from that in your business and enterprise account, or you have to use an actual confidential AI tool.
A confidential AI tool. And are there multiple versions of this available, or is it just?
So I don't know the ones that are available to the public, except the one I'm building, which is, specifically for legal, but you should be using confidential AI for everything you're doing, in my viewpoint.
Right. And I just don't know if it's available publicly or.
It is. You just pay way more.
You pay way more. Okay.
Yeah. Because instead of buying one account right now, you're buying 10 seats.
Oh, wow.
So it's like 10x the cost of everything. The cost,
yeah. Well, but see, this is the stuff where it suddenly becomes cost prohibitive for people. And then it becomes a risk mitigation question of like, what's the odds of something actually happening?
Right.
And
so I would say for confidential things, like your actual legal questions, that's worth paying the extra for. Or if you're actually innovating and using AI to do that, that's worth paying for. When you don't do that, the risk is also that you're training the model. Even if you turn it off, it's still in their database. They have, for 30 days, it can be pulled by courts and judges. So yeah, you make that decision as a business owner, but it's cost prohibitive for some people. But I think in the business context, it's a small cost to pay.
Yeah.
For something that might be, your moat.
Right. I get that. So, Anna, we have a few more minutes left. I want to just kind of have you give people a sense for like what's coming next? You told us about like the cases to look, keep an eye out for. Got that part of it. But and we talked about the whole, deep fakes, digital twins, robots, got that part of it too. Is there anything else on the horizon that you think is coming that we should be also paying attention to?
I think the biggest thing for entrepreneurs that they need to look at is the frontier models disseminating their business. So if you're a marketer and you're creating some sort of dashboard, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's helping with your, management of your project. That Anthropic could release that tomorrow and your whole business is gone. So like, I think people need to be looking out for that.
Okay. What about this whole space of agentic commerce? Are you familiar with that term?
Yeah, I think that's, I personally feel that it's very customized, and I feel like it's also a little bit overhyped. That's, Anthropic, a frontier model can release improvements to that. And so it will make your business, if it's around that, irrelevant.
Okay. What about the fact that, for the whole agentic systems to work, let's say on ChatGPT or Gemini, they want to connect to like, Instacart or Shopify accounts, and then you're having to give, your credit card information and all that kind of stuff, right? So if something goes wrong, how should people? I'm assuming the lawyers.
You should assume right now that when things go wrong, it's on you, and you will not be able to get any money back or anything like that. That's what you should assume.
Right.
So people shouldn't be using these tools without understanding them. That's usually where things go wrong, right?
Yeah.
And when you do use them, a way to have any sort of liability is by using kind of the enterprise business versions of these, because then they actually have a little bit more liability, and you probably have business insurance and things like that cover it. So that helps a little bit. But for the most part, when AI does something wrong, you should assume that you're on the hook for it. But you're giving access to a new system that you're directing it to take actions on your behalf, but you have to then assume, are you 100% fully comfortable with the system, and are you 100% fully comfortable in your direction, which most people use AI so incredibly poorly. I wouldn't trust them with my credit card.
Yeah. No, I get that. But this is the conversation that's happening though right now across a lot of different companies, as they're all looking at the whole agentic, commerce, workflow process and things like that. I'm actually talking about that in a couple of days at a major event. I'm giving a keynote about that in terms of how the world is about to shift.
So the reason I think it's a little bit of a short-lived industry until more safeguards and audit is in place is because people get really mad when their money is lost. It's something that people won't forgive. So unless that company is perfect and which AI is not perfect, and it does not work every single time. You know how when you open up a Word document, it's going to work every time. You're going to be able to type a document every time. There's never a time you open up Microsoft Word and it's not going to let you make a Word document. That's not the same for ChatGPT. It's not. Sometimes it doesn't let you upload. Sometimes it doesn't work. APIs crash. This and that happens. Like, it is not there yet that I think agentic commerce is ready to be mainstream. Well, people will try, and a lot of people are going to make money trying to do so. But I think we're 6 months out.
No, it's not going to be like overnight. There's no question about that. But
I think the tech isn't there for that yet.
But you're seeing advancements. So, like for example, with Amazon, right? They've launched Rufus, which is a generative AI tool embedded inside the Amazon platform. So they've kept it pretty closed walled in that sense, right? So people have already given their information. They're already buying on Amazon. The only difference now is that you're also using Rufus as another discovery tool within that closed wall system, basically. So I think that's where the trust factor is high in that case. Versus
and Amazon is not going to release a product without a lot of guardrails because they have too much to lose. So, Amazon's also not going to be innovating something that great. Like, it's not that great of a, AI. It's not that great of an agent. There's people who've created really cool things. It just doesn't work perfect every single time.
Right, right.
And
Yeah.
it's not Amazon that's creating that.
Yeah, and that's where I was going to go next, because when you look at people who are building on ChatGPT, because they are not connected to a Walmart or a Target, or they're trying to connect it, but the pilots aren't working as well as they thought they would. That's why you're seeing, for example, with Walmart, they announced in October that they're going to have a partnership with OpenAI, but then in February or March they came back and said, yeah, maybe we're going to pivot a little bit more, right? So all these pilots that are going on, I think, are going to be really a big tell in terms of what's happening. So yeah, and I'm just thinking also about the fact that even as they're testing these things out, to your point, from a legal perspective, there's going to be all these other issues that they have to also factor in, which they've
Yeah.
not talked about at all just yet.
No, I think we're months off, if not years off, from it being mainstream, because it's just too much. Like, imagine if you go on Expedia and like your
Yeah.
flights get booked wrong. People
Yep.
are going to be pissed, right? It's
Yep.
too big of, you can't mess with people's money to that degree.
Correct.
It's
Okay.
too high risk.
Totally agree with that. So Anna, last question, and I saved this for last, because I know you're probably not going to be able to say a whole lot about it, but I still had to ask you the question. You're having your own little thing going on with OpenAI, right? Is what I picked up. Is there anything you can share, or you cannot share anything at all?
No, I mean, all the filings are public. Yeah, OpenAI sued me. They actually just sued me again, like in a repetitive case, because they're losing their first one. No, their lawyers are very bad, and their lawyers don't know how to use AI, because if they had run their filing through ChatGPT, it would have caught some typos and mistakes. So I'll leave it at that even OpenAI isn't hiring very good lawyers that know anything about AI. But yeah, I have a Substack, like a AI blog on a GPT, and OpenAI says that it's too close to ChatGPT. They say people are going to be confused. I know.
What?
So that's why they're suing me. And this is, of course, the company that the whole public thinks is copying every other human writer. So it's just a funny thing. But OpenAI has a history of losing cases, so I don't think they'll settle. I think they'll fight till the end and they'll lose.
Okay.
So
Will you be open to coming back after a period of time, just to give us
Of
an update on
course.
how everything has happened?
Yeah, of course. It'll be months. Everything in the legal world takes a long time, but I'm pretty confident, as in, like, I would bet my career on it, since I wouldn't post videos about it otherwise. But I'm 100% confident we're winning it.
Wow.
So,
Okay. Well, good luck with that. I'm so curious. I saw you post that. I was like, OpenAI suing you, like, of all people, you like.
I
Sorry,
know.
don't feel the way, but like
Even before AI was popular, I was using AI like for hours every single day. I teach lawyers how to use AI, like, for their licensing requirements and things. So and primarily for many, many years, I would say before this year, maybe for the last 12 months, but I was exclusively using ChatGPT.
Yeah.
It was definitely the head of AI for a long time. So I'm like a big fan of ChatGPT, but yeah, they decided to sue me.
Oh wow. Well, that's a rare privilege too, I guess. So,
Funny.
absolutely. Well, Anna, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah,
I
thank
can't
you
thank
so
you
much
enough.
for having me.
And yeah, I would love to have you back. Whenever is appropriate time, you're always welcome back to the show.
Awesome.
And would love to hear about how things are advancing with you, and you can give us an update on what's happening on the legal front. I think you're going to be my go-to person for a lot of things now, by the sounds of it. So
Yeah, of course. No, I'd
all
love
right.
to come back. There's so much we still have to talk about.
Of course. Well, thank you so much again. Thanks everyone for listening, and we will be back soon.